So, and it's because of people like you that participate. So thank you again for being here with us. We have a good group of people on the list tonight. I'm excited. Hope that you all are in and ready to talk about Educated by Tara Westover. We haven't read a memoir in a while, at least to my knowledge. And off the bat, this reminded me of The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, I believe is her name. And we read that many years ago. And that's just the first thing I thought of when I read this one. It's been a very popular book. It's been out for a little while, and I don't think it's in paperback yet. So thank you for getting the hardcover or audio or digital, however you decided to read it, or from the library. Thanks to Friends of the St. Paul Library for sponsoring our events. So a little bit about the author. She was born in Idaho in the tender year of 1986. And spoiler alert, she got her BA from Brigham Young University. Yeah, if you haven't gotten to the end, there is an education involved here. She later goes on to get a PhD at Cambridge. She currently lives in London. And I read this book, and then I listened to a lot of interviews with her, and I saw Oprah interview her, I saw Bill Gates interview her. This book really struck a chord with a lot of people, and there's many people I've talked to that have said, you know, this one is one that's going to stick with them. So I am really interested in what you guys thought of it, and I would love to hear if there's somebody who just finished it, maybe today, and has a really fresh take and is excited to talk at Books and Bars. If you want to raise your blue hand, and I will call on you and unmute you. Anyone interested in starting our discussion tonight? Let me see here. No hands yet. Okay. Any questions about how we're doing this? I also have an icebreaker question for anyone who maybe doesn't want to talk about the book yet. I am looking for one more book for our December reads. I'm pretty sure we're going to do Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline for our late December read, or mid-December, but I need something for early December. I have a list that I've put in our bookshop page, which, if you know, you can actually buy books and support Books and Bars. And I have a list of ideas that could work for 2021, and they could also be something that we round out December with. So when you have a chance, if you want to peruse the list that I've just shared with everybody there, feel free to, as we're going along, I see a vote for American Dirt already, help us decide what we're going to read in December, which is not to say that a lot of these other books won't get read in the rest of 2021, but I'm just looking for the one to pick to kind of round out the end of this year. So think in terms of what you might want to be reading over the Thanksgiving break, whatever that break might be, whatever that looks like. But we finally have some blue hands up. I'm excited to call on Ginger Buckland. Ginger, are you ready to talk to us? Ginger, let's see. I'm asking to unmute you. Maybe you have to unmute yourself here. I'm trying.
Okay.
There you go.
Are we both unmuted now? Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, this is the first time I've actually talked out loud on the virtual calls. So that's kind of exciting because when we're live, I'm very comfortable, and somehow Zoom is very intimidating for me. So, yay.
You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. I have not reviewed the book list yet, so I'm not going to talk about the icebreaker. I'm just going to talk about Educated for a minute. I very much enjoyed this book, but I'm super interested in hearing what other people have to say, because I had sort of a fundamentalist Christian upbringing. And so a lot of the things, like it wasn't anything like I wasn't exposed to like the prepper lifestyle or this whole survivalist thing, but the whole concept of like distrust of the medical institutions and this like all encompassing like trust in God to solve all your problems, and sort of re-educating yourself and sort of getting away from that very insular kind of mindset was fascinating to me. And it was like validating in a way for me personally, just because I understood so many things that she was saying. And honestly, some of the folks in my family were, like we admired families like the Westovers, right? Like we felt that we were like not completely fulfilling God's plan for us because we were not like totally self-sustainable. We were not in, we weren't as committed as they were. So anyway, so that was my first thought. And so I had just this very personal reaction to it. And I'd love to hear what other people thought that maybe could look at it a little bit more objectively than what I could do.
Well, thanks, Ginger. Hashtag family goals you had. So I'm wondering if you feel like opening up to us about how those things have changed for you, and do you now view it through the lens? It sounds like you were reading this and it really brought you back to, you know, the way you were brought up. But if we can ask, do you have a similar ending to your story to hers, or, you know, what? I guess if your family get hurt, would they go to the doctor now is the question. And I hope that they're okay.
Some would and some wouldn't. My mom still wouldn't, even to this day. In fact, it's like getting difficult for her to drive because she's got like medical issues that are pretty treatable, but she can't drive because she doesn't have the mobility, because she doesn't believe in the medical solutions. But I think that's probably another element that I share with the author, that personally, like going away to college and like moving away and being exposed to different lifestyles and different mindsets and thinking about things in different ways, really, you know, it very much expands your mind, and what you might consider to be reasonable, and being able to see what the different options are. So I also loved Tara's journey in, you know, in like moving overseas and seeing all these different world experiences, and how that it's not a singular moment that everything flips. It is very much like through osmosis, right? You're just in these different spaces and seeing different things and experiencing them, and slowly but surely you wake up and you realize, like, oh, I don't agree with that anymore, and I don't agree with that anymore either. And it takes you on a journey. So I'd love to see what she writes next and what the next phases of her journey are.
Excellent. Yeah. It is at a younger age to be writing a memoir, and she has talked about that in interviews about why she intentionally wrote it, you know, instead of looking back much later in life, why she wanted to get this part out now. I see a question in the chat. If I can ask you while I have you, Ginger, where did you grow up? If you're willing to share that, where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up actually in the suburbs here in Minneapolis, like the exurbs, but I spent all my summers in northern Minnesota, in rural Minnesota. And
Okay.
And yeah, our family vacations were like to, you know, Kentucky and North Carolina, and some of the things in the Bible Belt where we had hoped to move and become more of that lifestyle. And like my mom wanted to homeschool us, but like couldn't figure out how to do that. So it was like we were wannabes of this lifestyle. It's an interesting place. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. I mean, yeah, now your mom is she's loving it. It's really easy to homeschool and to convince anyone to homeschool somebody. So
Exactly.
all it takes is a global pandemic. All right, VS, can I unmute you? Can you talk to us from New York, right?
Yes, hello, Jeff. Yes, hello, everyone from New York. I read this book quite a while ago, and then I recently kind of skimmed through and reread it for this group. And I raised my blue hand before Ginger spoke, so I can't really speak exactly to what Ginger raised. However, I'm sure everybody had their own personal experiences, however they related to this book based on their own family upbringing. I was raised in a very large family. I had 6 siblings. We were not survivalist on a mountain or anything, and we did go to the doctor, so I can't relate to that. My earliest childhood, I did go to church, but then my mother remarried an atheist, so I don't relate to the religious aspects of this book. However, I do relate very much to the large family aspect of it. And when you're in a large family, you're very self-reliant. to a larger extent, I think, than a smaller family. So I related to that kind of, you know, this woman has a lot of independence in her, which partly is a survivalist thing just by virtue of being in the big family, but in addition to which, of course, she had the very, you know, a father who seems to be mentally ill and really influenced her perception of herself. Perception, that's what I wanted to talk about just briefly. This book raised for me thoughts about perception on many levels. The first level, you're talking about a memoir. Of course, this woman is remembering things from childhood, and we perceive things different when we're children. Things are larger than life. Although I felt that this book felt very realistic to me, you do have to, I think, you know, be aware of that she's recounting things from her childhood and how she might have perceived them differently. The next level of perception that I started thinking about in this book is just how other people in your life and in your family and in your life in general influence your perception. Where she was really, you know, strongly influenced about her own self-image based on how her father and her mother and, you know, her older abusive brother, how they treated her and tried to define who she was. And so that was a big part of her education, breaking out of other people's perception of her and trying to define who she was. Then what Ginger said, you know, getting out of the home and going into the world, how this made me think of, in my family with the large family, it was almost kind of a given that as soon as we graduated high school, we just flew the coop. And when you get out in the world, you do experience so much more and reflect back on your perceptions of your childhood. The third level of perception I thought was really interesting. When she went to Cambridge, she said she wanted to study historians, not just history, but historians, because we live in the moment, and as soon as we experience the moment is gone in its history, but it's history in our minds and our perception. And history is defined by how it's communicated by people with different biases and different levels of perception. So I thought that was interesting that she wanted to study history and historians because she was given so many false histories as a child. So anyway, that's my 2 cents and the things that this book made me think about.
Thank you, Via. I see Laura has her hand up. Laura, can I unmute you? Talk to us, Laura. Laura Rubin.
Okay, so I thought it was interesting that you brought up Glass Castle, because I read that book. That is a memoir, correct? And I thought it was fabulous. I really, really liked it. That woman, Janine Walls, overcame some really big obstacles, as did the woman from Educated. I also read, at the same time I read Educated, I had finished Where the Crawdads Sing, and that is not a memoir. I did not care for that book. I thought it was really too unrealistic. So Glass Castle and Educated I loved. Where the Crawdads Sing, which is a kind of a similar story in that just terrible parents or parents who are neglectful, and how these women survive. And the true stories, I just wanted to just say I found more believable, but maybe that's because it actually happened. And then somebody in the comments brought up Hidden Valley. And I typed in, do you recommend it? So that's my other question for whoever read Hidden Valley. I don't know anything about that book, but I just wanted to make comments about those 2 books that were similar to Educated. So that's it for now.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Yeah, I'm glad you saw the connection also with Glass Castle and enjoyed that one. Interesting about Where the Crawdads, that is one that has gotten such incredible reviews, and I know there's a lot of books and bars people who have really liked it. So I recently added it to our list, and I actually have it as a consideration to do in the coming months. Because yeah, I mean the reviews are just incredible, but maybe there is the difference of how you reacted to it based on whether one felt false in some way.
It felt false. It felt very false to me. And I'm somebody that I have to feel the book. I have to have it be believable, and it just wasn't to me. So I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thanks for your comments, and we will see if we read those others. But yeah, Glass Castle was a favorite from years ago here. I see Bonnie Marshall. Bonnie, can I unmute you? Could you talk to us, Bonnie Marshall?
Yeah, hi. So talking about these other books, it makes me think that this kind of memoir actually occupies a specific class, which is somebody who grows up in a restricted environment and then somehow makes it out. So like, I always say it's like, and I'm kind of a sucker for this genre where you're reading the book and you're like, how does this person like get out of this situation to go on and then later write this book, which is like this very compelling through line to see how it is that they actually come to read the book. So it makes me think of the Glass Castle, which I couldn't wait to find out how she got out of it. How did that happen? So it's really compelling. I will suggest two other books if you like the flavor of the story. Jeanette Winterson, amazing novelist from England, wrote the best memoir in this class called Why Be Happy If You Can Be Normal? And she grows up in a very restricted religious questionable mental health type childhood and ends up going to Oxford and now is a very famous English novelist. Because she's such a good writer, the book is just amazing. It's the kind of thing you want to take a highlight or two or rip off a page and like send it to your friend in the mail. Another book that also reminds me of this theme is which is a ultra Orthodox Judaism environment. All who go do not return by Shalom Dean, which is it's a Grey Wolf Press memoir, and it is about his orthodoxy and then starting to question, starting to read philosophy, starting to read wider and take in more information, and then starting to filter it through what he was taught to believe. And that when he does leave, he can't go back, so it's, so anyway, I like these kinds of stories that take you through somewhat of a very unlikely journey, because there are many people living in restricted communities like this who don't leave, so anyway, I'm a sucker for the genre. I think the genre is called How in the Hell Did They Get Out of There? I think.
Nice. Well, good to see you again, Bonnie. Welcome back. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I think that this is a popular genre, and there definitely is, I think, a bit of, if they get out okay, it kind of allows you to the horrors that they're going through at the time. The visitations from the brother and these things. You at least know, like, well, she lives to tell. She wrote this story. I know this has to have somewhat of a happy ending, at least, and it's not going to totally, and you want to see how she gets a better life and how she betters herself. To the point of what Via brought up and with Laura, and talking about how, whether it feels true or not, and whether, at what point do you look back and say, well, this is my side of the story. And there are some footnotes, right, where she talks about, someone else remembered it this way, slightly differently. And she has some notes in there about that. And I think that anytime we read something in this genre, there is a certain element to that. And, Has anyone looked at her family's company? I mean, her mother's company it looks like it's doing fine. I mean, it's doing quite well, which is kind of surprising to me. The way Tara Westover writes about it, I kind of thought it was this, you know, I didn't really think that they had any sort of business smarts or that it would last. I mean, you get the sense that they're doing okay by the end, but I guess it's still, you know, doing just fine. Which is not to say that, you know, she has also talked about the one thing she wanted from her mom and just wanted it earlier, and she gets much later, is sort of an apology, in the sense that her mother said, you know, I didn't realize how bad it was, and it's my job as a parent to protect you, and I didn't do that. And she kind of was like, I didn't need, you know, like anything else. I just needed her to actually acknowledge that at some point, and she does, like, later in life, and that's really something that was a positive aspect of this telling of her story that she got from her mom. But got a couple more hands here. So Cara, I'm unmuting you. Talk to us.
I will say, just to answer your warm-up, Jeff, I started watching the TV show Lovecraft Country. Very good.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I wouldn't be opposed to reading the novelization.
So no surprise. Yeah, right now my number one with a bullet, that my choices are Lovecraft Country and Ready Player 2, but I don't want to impose that on everybody. That second episode was just insane. And then I guess the story is the book itself is kind of episodic also. And it kind of deals with like different horrors and related to like how they're inspired by Lovecraft. But revisiting, you know, the 50s in America and race. It is written by a middle-aged white guy, but it's gotten good reviews. And yeah, the show is fascinating. If you have HBO Max, and you guys can check out Lovecraft Country, it might spark your interest in reading that book also. But thank you for seconding my vote on that one. But talk to us about this book, Educated.
I thought it was interesting that Bonnie mentioned like this is like a genre, because she mentioned 2 books, and I had even forgotten about The Glass Castle, but I had 2 other books that I was like, wow, I'm reading a lot of books that are like the exact same narrative, but they're all true stories. They're all memoirs. The other 2 I was thinking of were Unorthodox, and I'm not as good with the authors, but they made a TV show out of this one as well. But it's about a woman who escapes a Hasidic Jewish community that was very conservative. And then another one called The Only Girl in the World, which it was less of a conservative community and more like a really conservative cultish household, with her father figure as a cult leader and just her and her mother as like the people in the cult. And they all basically escape through books and education, and music is also a theme in all of them. And so I just thought that was, and Bonnie's putting the Unorthodox book in the chat. I just thought it was really interesting that there are so many books like this. And aside from one of the ones mentioned tonight, they're all about white women. And so I was kind of like wondering in the back of my head, I was like, how many more are there? And I did a quick Google search, and there's like a few more that I didn't mention because I haven't read them, and Bonnie didn't mention them either. And so it is interesting. And I'm kind of wondering, like, if I'm just not, like, are they not as popular? Am I not thinking of them? But are there more that are like, that are about like people of color who are, I don't know, escaping in that way? I can think of a few books where like a non-white person kind of escapes their situation through education, but they don't like leave their family behind or have quite the same experience. And I don't hear about those books like quite as prominently as like some other books like Educated and The Glass Castle. So yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thought. I don't know that I have like an answer to it, but there are just so many books like this that I find it interesting that like there are so many similar stories that are so popular. And then I was going to say the big thing I reacted to was the amount of like catastrophes this family went through health-wise, and none of them died. I was like blown away. Every single time an accident happened, I was like, this is it. The brother's dead. The father's dead. He like, his whole body is burned up and he's fine. The mother like just sits in like the basement for 2 weeks, and she comes up and she clearly has some issue. Like, I'm just amazed. Like, people can die so easily, but everyone in this family is just robust and does not need any help. it was insane. There were so many car accidents and so many accidents at construction sites, and I was just, it made me so anxious. I knew Tara wasn't gonna die, but I was just waiting for someone in that family to die tragically.
Yeah, the dad seems invincible. He was like Freddy Krueger or something. He survives all of that burning, and yeah, it's kind of amazing. I thought for sure, yeah, that there'd be a funeral, but yeah, incredible. So in relation to all of these other ones that you're reading, the white woman escapes through education genre, whatever we're calling it, how does Tara Westover's writing compare to the others, or her story here? Any thoughts? Is this volume not working on this one? Could you hear me? No? Did my volume cut out? Anyone?
No, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay.
I'm just not sure whether she knew she was supposed to respond.
Okay.
You're asking her.
All right. Well, that's a question to anyone then. It's not just to Cara. Your thoughts about the white woman escapes through education genre. Really, how does Tara's story and her writing about it compare to others you've read? And, we've had a couple say that they would want to read more about what she does later in life. But think about that in your comments tonight. I see Mark has his hand up. Mark, could I unmute you? Would you talk to us?
Yeah, so the other book that I thought of, and I didn't read this one as part of Books and Bars yet, but I'm going to get to it. But Room has a similar theme, although not a memoir, and also a little more metaphorical, obviously, than the other books that have been mentioned, in the spirit of escaping a situation and having consequences after that happens. So wanted to drop that mention of that book. As far as the two books that have been compared most directly here, The Glass Castle and Educated, I read Educated about a year ago, and I read The Glass Castle afterward because I'm catching up on the backlist for Books and Bars. And I was just shocked at how parallel they were in terms of, I felt like I could have almost gone back and forth between chapters and seen a lot of the thematic overlap with that. So that felt really great to me in terms of appreciating the writing in both of them. I thought they were really excellent. Some of probably the top two books that I can think of in recent history of having read them, and somewhat close to each other, and approximately. I will say the flip side of that is Hillbilly Elegy was probably one of my least favorite books of any book that I've read. Nothing in it, like from the title to the marketing of it to how it all played out in terms of him getting as much traction and exposure for his message. I just thought that was a big fail. I mean, compared to these other books. And it did make me think a little bit about how, if we're looking at this from a point of privilege, reading these books, is some of it just, we can't believe that all of this is happening against the backdrop of us having relatively privileged lives. Like, I wanted everyone else in the Westover family to get comeuppance in relation to the amount of damage that they had done on the family. So you want the good ones to come out on the good side of things. You want the bad ones to get some kind of retribution. I feel terrible that her mom is having so much success with her business. Like, I shouldn't want to feel that way, but that's just where I come from in terms of that whole sense of fictional retribution versus what's possible in a memoir. So that's my piece.
Thanks, Mark. And where are we now? We're in Oregon, right? You
Yes.
are, that is.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us from all over the country. Wherever you move, Books and Bars is with you. I like the shelf in the background. It's a nice shot that you set up there. I can't read the titles, but I can see that you're letting people know that the books are just right over your shoulder. They're there for you. And I love that you're catching up on the Books and Bars backlist. That's so cool. Thanks for doing that. In the chat, someone pointed out that Brie Larson, the actress, she starred in both The Glass Castle and Room film versions. Maybe we'll be lucky enough to see Brie Larson as a young Tara Westover in an Educated series or film at some point. I don't know. And you really don't like Hillbilly Elegy. Now, that's another one that gets brought up a lot. I haven't read it myself, but I was just talking to my mother-in-law this week, and we were talking about this book, and she brought up that her club was talking about Hillbilly Elegy. And I know that Ron Howard is tapped to direct a film version of that one, but for whatever it is, it really struck a chord with you. I saw someone in the chat recommended it, and you know, sometimes those are the good ones, though, the ones that Mark hates and that someone else loves. It's okay. Sarajane, your hand's up. Could I unmute you? Would you talk to us, Sarajane Myers?
Yeah, I agree with Mark on Hillbilly Elegy. I did not care for that at all either, for all the reasons he said. About all the catastrophes, I don't know if anybody was like me, but every time those kids would go to work with their dad, I would get so tense. I was just, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I mean, it was just one thing after another. My heart would just start pounding in my chest as I read these kids, these children doing these totally unsafe things. I mean, and you're right. It's a wonder they didn't all die. As far as where the crawdads sing, I did that in another book club, and there were a lot of people that thought that was unrealistic as well. I did not. I felt like, because the thing that most people said was, how did that child survive? But I remember, if you saw the movie Lion, and that young man, how he survived. I mean, and transferred from one continent to another. I mean, by his own wits, by what he knew, what he learned around him, and that kind of thing. So I didn't find it totally unrealistic. I don't think any of us know how we would respond if we were left in that kind of situation. She was very much a student of her surroundings and took comfort in them, knew how they worked together. And I thought she was an amazing young woman. And of course, the people that she did allow into her life were very protective of her and took very good care of her. But yeah, I thought Educated was very interesting and very good. And I too hope that all the good folks would come out. I was so angry with the mom. I don't know how any mother can stand by and watch your children be subjected to that, and particularly the abuse by the older brother. That was just really difficult to read and to deal with.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I listened to an interview with Tara, and a lot of talk about her brother and how, you know, we as readers could be reading this and saying, I can't believe, you know, he's going to do this again. Don't fall for this. He's going to hurt you again. And you just want to warn her. But it's that, you know, she was very close to him, and he would show her a little bit of kindness. And then that was just enough to get her to believe, you know, maybe this time's going to be different, or to want that kind brother back, and to, you know, forget about what had just happened, you know, the last time, that sort of a thing. And it just takes repeated times until she could finally, you know, see that it's just not worth it, and that she has to make a break from that. Donna, I see your hand is up. I'm unmuting you. Would you talk to us, Donna?
Oh, sure. Just a couple quick comments. I also read Hillbilly Elegy, and in fact, because I'd read Hillbilly Elegy, I purposely put off reading this book for a long time. I mean, just until this past week for this group, because I didn't find Hillbilly Elegy to be particularly persuasive about how any kind of general truths. I mean, I think there was some pushback at the time too. It was almost like the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, or you too, even from a somewhat deprived background, you have a good grandma and some luck and work hard, and you too can go to an Ivy League school. I mean, it was a little bit sort of anti-government support, anti-government help, because the people, as I recall that book, there was so much pride of the people in the book not wanting or accepting any help or any support from society as a whole, and so on. And I think there's just my mindset right now. I just think we need to care a lot more about opportunities for people, and we can't just assume that people are going to figure out how to do this. And I thought, okay, educated, another book about somebody in a really deprived background, and boy, she ends up going to Cambridge and Harvard and all this. I thought, no, I'm not ready for that. But what I did find kind of interesting about this book in the sense of educated is that it does really talk much less about the schooling part of it. I mean, it is pretty phenomenal how she, by reading the Book of Mormon so carefully, apparently taught herself how to read closely, how to analyze, how to question, how to compare one big piece of writing to another, and how to ask some pretty profound questions that really impressed her professors once she got to college and graduate school and so on. But there isn't as much about that as there really is about what she had to realize about herself and how it was so hard for her to separate from her family. I mean, it kind of drove me nuts through the whole last part of the book, how she kept going back. And I know some of you have commented on that too, about how she would get 2 steps ahead and then, oh, she was willing to practically give it all up just to go back, visit her parents, try to get that love and affirmation from them that was never going to come. And her brother was going to be just as abusive to her. And he just wanted to say, oh, come on, girl, wake up. And I did read one or listen to one interview with her where she talked about one of the main takeaways she wanted people to get from the book was about estrangement and estrangement from family and how hard that is, and how, you know, it took her years and it took therapy and it took all of this, but it can be done. And she was a better person finally for separating herself from her family. So in that sense, I thought the title Educated was interesting. People think it's mostly about homeschooling and Ivy League schools and all this, but I think it's really about her personal psychological education in some pretty horribly abusive environments.
It is pretty amazing what she was able to do. In self-teaching herself. Whose phone is that? Hold on one second. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. It was pretty amazing. And I too did not, I initially thought the book was going to be more about the education system before I dove into it. And I thought, oh, it's going to be perfect that we're going to be talking about schooling versus homeschooling, and this is such a of the moment kind of thing. And then I was like, oh, it's not really about that. It's kind of a different story. But I don't know, as a question was asked in the chat, if the rights are sold yet. She has recently signed with CAA, big creative artist agency, to represent her for film and television rights. So I'm sure will have the pick of her, the litter to adapt this, but it doesn't look like it's been sold yet, or they know who's going to adapt it, at least from what I've seen so far. You guys really don't want to read Hillbilly Elegy. It's okay. It's not on my list. We're not going to do it. It just got brought up. So, you know, don't worry about it. It's not even one of the options for 2021, or especially for December. So, you know, the amount of anti-Hillbilly Elegy stuff I'm reading in the chat is just like, okay, I get it. I get it. We're not gonna read that one. Don't worry. And I won't go back to probably the white woman rises up through education for at least another couple years. I mean, we can only do these ever so often. So, but thank you for that. And I see John Burns has his hand up. John Burns, may I unmute you, and would you speak to us, sir?
Hi. So it sounds like this is a book club.
John, make sure we're unmuted here. John?
Hello?
I can hear him. Yes, I can hear him. We can hear you, so go ahead and talk.
I'm not hearing Rebecca now either. What happened?
Am I good to go?
You keep talking. I'll talk to Jeff in the chat.
Okay, so my name is John. I am actually, this sounds like a book club. I'm not in the book club. I'm a high schooler. I'm at Creighton Prep in Omaha. And this is actually a really crazy story because my mom got I think a Facebook link to a discussion about Educated, which was a book that our school had to read over the summer. And she got the link from, I don't know if you guys know Mrs. Ricks that is in the club. But yeah. Anyway, though, so I thought this was crazy, and you guys also mentioned the White Castle, or the Glass Castle, sorry. And my school also read the Glass Castle last year too. So there's two things I sort of wanted to point out. We really, last year at school, we really dived into parenting styles and how severe that is into a development of a child. For the Glass Castle, we associated the parents with uninvolved, as they put their own needs, they prioritize themselves before their children, and they chose to just provide for themselves and show little interaction for their kids. But I think that sort of not compares but contrasts to this book, as the parents in Educated are pretty authoritarian, strict parenting style. The father, obviously very conservative, is not very allowing of a lot of things, makes Tara work in the junkyard, and basically controls every aspect of her life. And when she moves on from living in Idaho, she's completely bewildered by how much control her dad had over her life. And it's amazing for her to figure out that this isn't common. Like, this isn't something that has happened for other people. So that really caught me by surprise, and I thought that was incredible. And the other thing I wanted to point out was, it's incredible, these stories, how when kids are limited in their education and aren't given the proper tools they need, and are neglected as young learners, they have an astonishing desire to want to educate themselves later in life. And I thought that was amazing. Like, this girl who was, like someone said earlier, just read the Mormon book and the Bible, was able to take that, and because she was so restricted, she found a love for wanting to educate herself, and that brought her so far, and even to Cambridge University. That just seemed to be amazing to me. And the same thing happened in the Glass Castle, and both of these authors turned out to be extremely successful and extremely intelligent as well. And I think that's very much due to their them being restricted as kids. That's all. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and stick around. And I'm sorry I missed the start of your comments because I was having a headset difficulty. Yeah. But it sounds like you found some excellent parallels between the two books also. And it's interesting because I didn't intend. I didn't set out for us to really talk about Glass Castle that much, but it just, the more I thought about it, it just, that's the closest parallel I could see also. And so it's incredible how far both of them have come, and being self-taught, so much of it. So I see the way we do it is we always give preference to the fresh hand. So I see you, Cara, but I see Charmaine Wide. Can I unmute you, and would you talk to us, Charmaine?
Yeah. I'm going to take my video off too. Hello again, everybody. It's good to be back. Yeah. Still pregnant.
Awesome.
Currently at the dog park with my daughter, who is really excited to go to a dog park. So we took a book club on the road today, and I just wanted to share 3 thoughts about the book. First of all, I grew up in the same faith as Tara Westover, and my husband and I read the book at different times, but one of the things that we talked about is we tolerate a lot of crazy in our faith. And we tolerate a lot of people at church or whatever, and we just kind of think like, okay, well, they're just kind of different. That's just how they are. And then you read something like this, and both my husband and I walked away and thought, we should not be so because I see this a lot, and I feel like there's got to be some way to be like, that is not okay. That's extremism. That's over the top. Rein it back. But I don't really know how you do that. And I mean, it's not like it's something that's unique to that faith. I mean, you see it like we've mentioned in other books and other settings where people are living in a very restrictive environment. based on a system of beliefs, whether it be the glass castle, other places like that. So that's just food for thought, is what do you really do as a community to realize that things are not okay at home? You know, because I'm sure everybody in Idaho just thought, okay, well, that's just the way they are. They're doing fine. And then you probably read something like this and feel like, man, I wish I could have helped or done something. And then my other thought about it was the difference a mother makes. And I don't mean to say that dads don't have to try, but one of the books I mentioned in the chat, which is a bit of an older book, is the prize winner of Defiance, Ohio. And I don't know if you've read that book. I would really recommend that book, but that's another situation where a father is very controlling. It's a Catholic family in that situation, and there's alcoholism, but the mom has a quiet protest. She has a very quiet revolution about the control and helping her kids not come out damaged from the control that's there. So I would recommend that book, because when I read The Glass Castle, then I read The Prize Winner of Defiance, Ohio, and felt like, wow, as a mom, you really can make a difference and show your kids, you know, kind of like what Tara wanted, just to be there for her, to stand up for her, to defend her. And then my only other thought on the book is, I was, like somebody else had mentioned, I was really disappointed. She didn't seem at peace at the end. She still went back to Idaho. And you know, I grew up in Utah. I grew up in a cultural bubble, and I now live in Texas. And I feel, and I understand hers is a very family connection, but I feel no desire necessarily to go back and sort through it. You know, I've just kind of moved on and said, you know, there's a different way that I can gain support, and there's a different group that I can have as my strength. I hope there's an educated too. I hope there's like a PhD. Maybe she's going to write another one that's called Doctored or something, where she finds that peace. Because in the end, I just wanted her to be happy. I was so happy she got out, but she just didn't seem settled. And so I hope that there's more to this story where she finds happiness and finds that, you know, it's okay. It's okay to overcome childhood trauma and to feel settled and not go back to Idaho and go back to that place. So those are my thoughts. Thanks for always letting me join.
Of course, and thank you for sharing so much of your personal story in relation to it. I know that Westover has talked about, she sees her aunts and uncles. She does miss, you know, out on, you know, half of the family that she's just, you know, that don't agree with her version of the story and what she said about it, and you know, and haven't really changed. And you bring up a really tough point about this idea of, what do we as people in the community, if we see something, you know, do we just say, oh, well, that's the way it is in that faith or that family, and it's not our business? In this case, it seemed that there weren't a lot of opportunities for other people to necessarily see it or interact because of how isolated or, you know, insular they were. But we have the example of when she's in, you know, in the show and able to, but not able to wear such extravagant costumes and clothing. So the, you know, the teacher has everybody, you know, wear sort of more of a plain, you know, that gray sweatshirty kind of thing. But yeah, what's the line between, if the child doesn't look like they're being abused or hurt, you know, how do you step in? And, you know, it's hard to say, because a lot of it was probably behind closed doors and it wasn't necessarily visible unless they saw the injuries from the work, you know, the job that she was working on in scrap heaps and stuff like that. But that's tough. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so it sounds like you know, you've come to peace with it, at least yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm fine with, you know, I can separate the culture from the faith, and I can separate, you know, people kind of going off the rails and what's sound and realistic and knowledgeable. But I know how, I guess that's part of my problem, is I know how the faith works. I know how they have people who are responsible. They have a, then they were called like a home teacher, a visiting teacher, who would be there checking up on them, and the leaders that they would have every Sunday at church. And I think about the families that I've seen that I've always been like, oh, well, they just homeschool. Oh, they just run the family business. And now I'm kind of thinking, how was that? Are they okay? Should I check up on them and see like how now as adults? Because I just thought, yeah, that's just how that family does things, and I never really thought more about it. But this one made me think a little bit more that, you know, just to be aware that people are getting a healthy, you know, just healthy, that's what I would say, a healthy balance of life. It's not all this crazy. It's not this extreme. That you can have moderation, and it's a good thing.
Well, thank you, Charmaine. And you're a stunning example of what lengths someone will go to be a part of Books and Bars. So good luck with continuing health with your pregnancy. And and one of these next times you'll be holding up a nice new baby to show us also. It'll be very nice.
I can't wait. I'm ready. I'm so ready.
Awesome. Okay, good luck. Melissa, fresh hand. Are you with us? Could I unmute you? Melissa Zierden.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, friends. I think I actually maybe have forgotten my point since I raised my hand because I was so interested in hearing what everybody said. But just some things that came to mind for me that kind of stood out to me that I think I'm going to be echoing what others have said and mentioned in the chat. But I really did like that the book, you know, kind of thought about education, not just like what you learn in the school system, but like what, you know, just learning and lifelong learning of like how, you know, what a healthy relationship looks like, she's learning, you know, social norms that she missed as a kid. And she's, you know, kind of did her own self-education and kind of the, you know, the practical or the real, you know, she's learned from the land, she's learned from, you know, these precarious situations she's been in, and then kind of the education, the formal like US education system as well. So I just thought, it was neat to kind of think of all the ways that you might get an education, you know, quote unquote, in life. But and I think what John said, and I saw somebody else in the chat too, is just kind of, I mean, clearly she's got some, she's naturally, you know, got some gift and some grit that's so she's, you know, in a good position to be able to just kind of pivot and persevere and be very intelligent and successful. But just that idea of, you know, was she able to do a lot of these things because she didn't have that kind of formal US education system framework? You know, she kind of was able to transcend, her thinking was able to kind of transcend and go outside some of these boxes that maybe her peers were more confined to because of the, you know, you've been taught of a certain way of thinking things or a certain process you need to go through, and she wasn't limited by those things. So I thought that was just really neat. And I thought I had a third kind of comment about the book, but now I'm not. I think it's just, again, like that kind of fact versus fiction, where, you know, if this had been a fiction book, I would have been like, well, that's so over the top. You couldn't get into this number of car accidents and almost eaten by machinery and like lit on fire and stuck in a garbage can and like, you know, get strep throat and go outside in the winter and stand outside to cure. I'm like, you couldn't survive all of that, which clearly, you know, you do. The whole family has. So that was just kind of wild. And then I was amused when I read Trevor Noah's, well, we all did for the club too, but in Trevor Noah's book, the Hitler connection to her, and, you know, Tara had never heard of him. You know, why would she? She wasn't, you know, given an education. She didn't study World War II at any point in her life. And, you know, and same thing with Trevor Noah and his, you know, that's not a part of history that was maybe relevant to part of the world where he grew up. But that just kind of like, it makes you think about the things that we like hold dear and everybody's taught in school, and you kind of accept this as like, this is the big example of what, you know, this point looks like. And then there are people who are like, what is that? You know, I've never heard of that. And I don't know. So it was a very interesting read. And I really enjoyed it. So.
Thanks, Melissa. And thanks for reminding me and all of us that Trevor Noah is not a white woman. So, I don't know. I don't know if Born a Crime fits under survivalist memoir, which I'm seeing is maybe what we're calling this genre tonight, survivalist memoir. At least that's what David Daniels said to me. I like it. Kevin, I see you. May I unmute you? Kevin Thomsen.
Hey, so this is sort of going on in chat, and it's talking about how, people are talking about how, or what people in the fundamentalist or prepper survivalist community might think about this book. And yeah, a lot of talk about how they might not read it or they might just reject it out hand. And I think one interesting thing that might come out of it is thinking about how people, what to people makes a testimony credible. And I think from those communities, they might say that just the very fact that she wrote this book and sort of aired family troubles with the public makes her testimony inherently less credible. So I would be very interested to read what a very, very devout and almost survivalist Mormon reader would think of this.
You think that, wait, did I hear this right? You think that this actually makes her story less credible?
I think to people in that community, they would say, she didn't keep it in the family. She didn't keep it within her faith community. She aired all these grievances with the public. So obviously she's lying about it. I think that is a reaction that might happen. And I wonder if that is something that people have thought. Because that's the first thing that came to mind when I was reading it and thinking about her family reading it, is that, oh, well, she left and she joined this this fancy educational system, and the fact that she is, you know, talking with all these secular groups about it means she's obviously influenced by the devil, so it must be false.
Wow, interesting take on it. I haven't read, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of backlash, like I haven't, but if anyone has read any other viewpoints that have been printed, you know, with family members or their side of it, you know, feel free to let us know. I see Rachel Kamin has her hand up. Can I unmute Rachel Kamin? Are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm just downstairs from you. So my comment, and I have a feeling this will not be very popular, but I'm somewhat sympathetic to the mom. I feel like she is also just trying to survive. She has, you know, she's in this relationship. She's married to someone who has a severe mental illness, clearly, and she's, I mean, it's probably a coping mechanism, codependence, or whatever the psychological analysis is of it, but she's trying to survive too. And yes, she is a crappy mom, but I also feel somewhat sympathetic towards her. I feel like she's doing her best under the circumstances. And while it's not the best by her kids, she's survived. I mean, her character goes through an evolution in this book too. She starts as a very meek woman who doesn't want to be a midwife, and she's forced into it by her husband, and then she kind of grows into it, and he builds her up, like he's like, you know, kind of shaping her in a way of she seems reluctant to in all of the roles that she's sort of hoisted into, and eventually she seems like she's become comfortable in them, but I just feel like she's coping the best she can in a bad situation.
Well, you know, I mentioned before, Tara Westover said the one thing she just wanted was some acknowledgement from her mom that, you know, that her mom knows what she went through, and I mean, she got that apology from her, and she said that's pretty much like all she wanted or needed. She didn't need anything more, didn't need her mom to like try to make other amends or to make some big change or anything like that. But it was just like, Yeah, I wasn't totally there for you. It was bad. I should have helped a little bit more, and I'm sorry for not being, the parent that I needed to be at that time. But
do you know if her mom read the book?
I don't know, except I know that the apology was in some reaction to at least knowing what is in the book, and to Tara Westover having some acclaim because of it. Like she reached out to her and said that then. But I don't know if it was, if she actually read the whole thing and talked about it. We could find out. But yeah, that'd be probably a tough read. But
Jeff, this is Rebecca.
Yes.
I'm using my co-host privilege to butt in here. Sorry, Cara. I'll be short. One of the most compelling parts of it for me was when her brother was training his girlfriends with that. You can't, I ask you for something, you provide it. I say it's the wrong thing and it's your fault. Go get me something else. And that it was obviously, or at least most likely, a behavior he learned from his dad. These women were trained to be the kind of women they are. And Tara was just this close to becoming one of those women herself. And her mom almost could have broken it at some point, but I think after she had the brain damage, there was no hope really for her. And she had to betray her children to maintain the world that she lived in. And that, for me, was heartbreaking. So I agree. I have a lot of sympathy for the mom. Of course, we're hearing it from Tara, so we have an animus against her because her mom hurt her, really, really hurt her. But this is a family that should not have had any children. And I think that's the main point that we should be taking away from all of this. Some people should not be parents, and they should not be given the ability to, destroy so many other people, because ripples like this live on in multiple communities and they hurt all kinds of people. And I think we're seeing that right now play out in our country, because if we're a country that doesn't believe in the same facts, if we don't believe in the same morals, if we don't believe in the same history, we cannot exist together. And I know that sounds really apocalyptic, but I really think that that's what we're seeing now. I have members in my family. They're from Oklahoma. They're snake handlers. They're people who court death. They rarely die. That's also, so maybe they are being watched over by some sort of God. But their girls can never wear anything but dresses. They aren't allowed, I mean, the restrictions on women in these families are extreme. And I think it's patriarchy that's gone bad. I think it's religion that's gone bad. I think it's all sorts of stress, and I do think it is white culture that has gone bad. So those are my thoughts. Sorry, Cara, you can take over now.
I was going to say, Rebecca, you said a lot of what I was going to say, so that worked out really well. I was going to say, I felt like a deep sympathy for like the mom and all of the kids, even to some extent the brother who was like turning into, who became an abusive, bad person himself. Like, I think this book does a really good job of showing the cycles of abuse. And I mean, this was obviously a family that took religion to an extreme. So this isn't me saying like a critique specifically against the Church of Latter-day Saints, because I've known people who grew up in that church that were nothing like this family. But I've also known people who left the church and had maybe similar experiences to this. So there's like levels. But this family specifically, I was like, you've got an abusive figure in the father who has such big control over his family. And it really read as like cult-like to me, because like he used Mormonism as like a part of his facet of control. But like the things he said, whether it went against the church or not, that's what ultimately mattered to this family. It was like more about, to me, what the dad wanted and how the dad could control them versus religion specifically. And so like the mom obviously, like, I guess we could say failed her daughter in a way, but to me, the mom was like an abuse victim as well. And I think that Rebecca was right. Like, we saw her, like, when she kind of got her financial independence, that she was starting to, like, you know, take more control of the family and do better. But like after that car accident and her brain injury, it just seemed like kind of for her own survival, she fell back into these patterns that were really toxic to her kids. And then you have Tara herself, who, like, when you read about her perspective, you can see her becoming like that. Like, when she saw her brother training his girlfriends, she often had like very judgmental thoughts against those girls. Like, she wasn't like immediately sympathetic to them. It took her years later, you know, kind of, she wasn't even fully escaped the situation, but, you know, she had to get out of that before she could even have sympathy towards these other women. Like, it didn't come naturally to her. If she hadn't got an education, she very well could have like continued to victim blame them and like become, you know, one of the women who looks away when they see children and other women being abused. So I don't know. I just thought it was very, very tragic. And even like the brother, you know, like in many ways it was like his own brain injuries and then the role model of his father that were really pushing him. You know, he didn't really have a chance to ever be a better person. I don't think he was ever inherently supposed to be like an abusive man, but his upbringing and his religion and I don't know, all of these factors have gone into it. And then of course, he does all of these things and there's no one around him to like reprimand him. Like, everyone just continues to support his abuse. So he just gets worse and worse and worse at it.
I'm blown away by, I did not know about her mother's book that was coming out. And I've just posted some of it in the chat here. It is called Educating. I see some others have written about it. Would you guys read it? Would you read Tara Westover's book? That's her mother's name, is Tara. And wow, it's her side of the story. And there's a link in there. Hey, I will put it in our bookshop. If you buy it at bookshop.org, Books and Bars gets a cut of that. So maybe if you want to read it, a real survivalist memoir from the mother's point of view. I don't know, maybe that would make some of us feel a little more something for her. 3 of her children are PhDs now. Really interesting. I mean, even if you don't read the book, it's interesting to read the link about the book and the family story from her side a little bit there. I see Andrew and Lisa have a hand up. They're sharing this. I'm going to ask to unmute at least one of them. Andrew and Lisa, talk to us.
It was me that had the comment. I really enjoyed this book. This was the book that I most often recommended over the last couple of years. I thought it was both really entertaining just from the standpoint of the narrative and the storytelling itself. But I also just loved the reflectiveness that the author had, the way that if I had to write something like this, I would have been really bitter. You know, it would not have come off in this kind of reflective, even-handed kind of way that she was able to tell the story. You know, I really felt like she gave her family a way more than a fair shake, really, in terms of, you know, how their responsibility for how things went. But I just wanted to mention that I think that this one of the reasons that this is a kind of a white-only type of story, that, as was mentioned a long time ago, a comment quite a bit earlier in the discussion, is that this really plays to a nostalgia that is out there in Americana, which is this kind of isolated, survivalist, you know, self-reliance type of living that we have out there, whether it's the family farm or large families and all the kind of dangerous things we used to do when we were kids and sort of that sort of thing. I mean, there's a real nostalgia for being for avoiding the kind of conformity that we've fallen into, you know, in you know, such as I suppose the 60s, 70s, whatever. But and I think that you know, we often do, you know, the counter stories to these types of things are you know, your suburban stories where, you know, the family is also awful in this totally unexpected behind the closed doors kind of way. And, you know, there's all kinds of ways that the families, you know, destroy their own children and wring out the creativity of them and all that sort of thing. So they're two sides of the same coin in my opinion, in terms of like why we treat this. And it's really, so to me, these types of stories are really white stories. It's really white culture, suburban versus rural, culture wars type of stuff. And you know, the reason that it's women often writing these is because it's the women that suffer the most in these kind of situations. You know, first of all, it's always the mom's fault. Why did she have to write the darn book? That's so stupid. You know, she shouldn't have to write it. It's not her fault. But now she has to go and defend this lifestyle. So, you know, you know, and probably the thing that I found most compelling about this book was the relationship between Tara and her sister. So her sister, you know, she really, at some point, you know, she really thought she had a connection with her sister and she was going to be able to help her sister out of this situation. And her sister completely turned on her in terms of like saying, nope, you're out of your mind. It's not you. It's not us. It's you. And kind of going back into that family dynamic where she was dependent on all of that, that sort of thing. So in any case, I think there is a real reason why this type of literature is out there. And I think we have the countervailing side of it, which is the suburban conformity and all of the pieces that go along with that, you know, whether it's the Celeste, Little Fires Everywhere, or whatever that book was a good example of, you know, the crushing presence of conformity and that sort of thing. So I really do think the reason that it is so visceral to us is that it does get right to the heart of those cultural wars, and we live in it. And it's not a Latino thing. It's not a Black experience. You know, the idea of saying, you know, kids don't be going out there and doing dangerous work to a migrant labor family or something like that. That is just a really kind of ridiculous statement to have to make. I mean, these kids are out there, you know, working in fields very early in the morning and very late at night. This is a totally different reality for them. It is about survival and that sort of thing. You know, the idea that we can complain that kids are put in dangerous situations in order to make their family function from an economic standpoint is itself a pretty entitled viewpoint.
Thank you, Andrew. Lisa, while you're here, do you have a rebuttal?
I'm trying to behave, so no.
Well, I think that there's a lot there that I would love to get into. Maybe save it for the chat. Okay, you keep behaving. Gretchen, you don't have to behave. Gretchen, you can say whatever you want when I unmute you. Please talk to us.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with Andrew tonight. I'm just a little too tired for that. But I did want to talk. We've only briefly touched on this on the dad. You know, and I get that there's the fundamentalist religion and that whole father figure being the, you know, kind of the ruler of the family. But this guy had significant mental health problems. And I think that was really the big driver with him. You know, he was obviously very bright and very creative in the weird stuff that he would come up with to do, but he was really mentally ill and obviously untreated. And that I think is something that was unfortunate for really the whole family, and probably the reason that maybe these people shouldn't have had children, or certainly that it was unfortunate that they subscribed to such a fundamentalist sect of the religion that getting any help for that mental illness wasn't happening. I mean, I think that there could have been a way that this family could have lived in their fundamentalist religion without the abuse and without that danger, had he had some sort of treatment for that. But obviously that wasn't ever going to happen. And I think, you know, so, I mean, here's me sticking up for the dad, but I think that was a really important piece, is that he was just off his rocker at times.
Thank you, Gretchen. How are you feeling, Gretchen?
Pretty tired today, but you know what? I only got one left to go. I had my second to the last infusion yesterday, and then September 8th is my last one. So I am on the way to, I don't know, getting some sort of new hair.
Happy to hear, and I look forward to seeing whatever you decide to do with that new hair.
Yeah, well,
So-
it's gonna, you know, it's gonna be interesting and a long haul,
Well,
but it'll be back.
Thanks for being with us, and yeah, keep staying strong. We're proud
Thank
of you. Laura Rubin's back. Laura, may I unmute you?
Here we go. So I did have to move because my husband and my son were sitting right next to me talking, and I kept on saying, can you guys move? But it was easier for me to pack up and move. But I guess my comment is I've always been very blessed. My parents have given me unconditional love, and I think every kid wants that. They want, and I guess my point is, you, as she's growing up, every kid thinks their parents are the best. And when at some point you realize as you're growing up that my parents, there's something wrong with my parents, you don't want to believe that. And as more and more things happen, and then her brother too, she wants to love them and she wants love from them. And when you start to realize that your parents aren't perfect and there's something wrong, I think that really, really hurts. And I think when people say from the outside, why did she just leave her parents? Why didn't she just give up on them? How hard is that? I think that's almost impossible. And that, I guess that's my point, is watching her slowly realize something's wrong with her parents was very, it's like, wake up, girl, wake up. And then when she slowly does, you're like, finally. But I mean, I think we're all raised to not think your parents are screwy, right? You want your parents to be, you know, perfect. So that's my point.
We do, and you know, whether they're perfect or not, we at least just want to be able to trust them, you know, and to believe that, you know, that they have our best interests, and they're really there to protect us. You know, I mean, there's just a few things. They might not be, you know, the nicest or the best or the coolest or the richest or whatever it is, but as long as, you know, they provide for you and they keep you safe, and that you trust that their intentions are that, you know, for you to be, you know, safe and happy and to be provided for. But yeah, when you start to doubt whether, you know, they know what they're doing, and you're in danger, you're at risk, and you're also, you know, you're not learning, it's pretty bad. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you can understand why it would take so long to break from that. Yeah. It's almost like,
it's sad.
Yeah, it's tough. And why she probably still isn't, as we said before, completely at peace, in the sense of, you know, hoping at some point there's a reconciliation or some sort of admission of something. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is Rebecca again. I'm bumping in again. I know. I think people turn to religion because they don't have good parenting. They want an unconditional father or mother figure. And it can get very twisted very quickly if that's what you're looking for from something that may or may not be that. So just my thought.
Yep, I could see that. I also think that, you know, in this case, you know, the religion it came from her parents, though. And I think, you know, a lot of kids, that's where it first comes from. But I could see that, like, yeah, another.
I was thinking of her father. I was thinking why her father was such a religious, because I think he had bad parenting. Even though he had the grandmother down the hill, I love the grandmother down the hill. She was awesome. You know, she kept him from getting his trash yard too big, and she, you know, she imposed certain rules on him, but they obviously didn't get along. And that was, I don't know, just a thought on my part.
I like it. Thanks, Rebecca. Mark, you're back with us. May I unmute you? Talk to us, Mark.
Yeah, so one thing I was thinking of also, since this is a theme for me lately, is the value of work and how much people should get paid for work. So just to address Rachel there for a second, I was really harsh on the mother, and so that's unfortunate I do have more sympathy for her. I think part of it is, in retrospect, she's got this natural health business that she runs off to the side now, and she's probably getting business because there's traction with the publicity that the Educated has gotten. I've got my own mixed feelings about essential oils and that whole way that essential oils work their way through the system. There's a Netflix maybe it's Hulu, but there's something called Well or Unwell that goes into essential oils. So that's a personal gripe of mine in terms of essential oils being a thing. But when I'm looking at it, everyone here has a passion for books. So when Tara is successful on her book, and when Books and Bars is successful financially, we all applaud that because we support that. When essential oils isn't something we buy into, but people get really successful off of it, or Mary Kay or some other multi-level marketing thing, then we look at it through our own lens of that as well. And I think the point being, you know, when you get religion and some of these other things involved, and you look at these people that run the mega churches that make well over what they need to make to do well, and then you're like, this person is really successful doing something that I could never support in my whole life, and I can't get behind it. It just creates this feeling of like, I don't want to be a part of this society, but I also want to respect the fact that we are part of a system that does allow the free market to support whatever businesses are successful. You know, I don't want the Kardashians to make a ton of money, but they do. So that plays in the background as I'm reading a book like this, or trying to think about the themes around the edges of a memoir like this. It gets sold and gets sold really well, and I want to support the writing because I think the writing and the storytelling is great. That's my piece.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Well, I will cancel that order of essential oils that I had sent to Oregon to welcome you to your new home. I thought that you could just essentially oil yourself down while you read all those old Books and Bars books, and it was just going to be, I mean, it was like a nice lavender for your neck that was going to just, you were going to love it. But I will cancel that. Sorry about that. What else have we not brought up tonight? Does anyone have any other comments or questions that they want to bring to the group? Maybe something, is there something in the chat that the rest of the group should know about that we didn't talk about? I usually get to read most of that later. I've seen a bit of it tonight. I see Donna with a hand up. Donna, talk to us.
Just quickly, I put it earlier in the chat. Oh, whoops. Okay, I put it earlier in the chat, but you know how music was important to her, and she got the lead in some musical thing she was doing locally, and then later got invited to be a guest soprano at the spur of the moment. And I thought, boy, how that's an important talent that she just have it innately. And there is an interview that she did on PBS NewsHour where Jeffrey Brown asks her if she would sing something at the end. And so I'll put the link again, but it's just lovely. She closes the interview just a cappella singing a Mormon hymn that she says is one of the most famous Mormon hymns. And she has really a lovely voice. So anyway, if you're just curious like I was about, does she really sing? She does really sing. So I'll put that in the chat.
All right, thanks, Donna. Yeah, I'd love to hear it. I think was that in the one that I posted? Because I had a part of a PBS interview that I put on the Facebook page in the invite, but I missed the singing part. Maybe I didn't get to the end yet. Okay, excellent. Yeah, it's so fascinating when, you know, we so often ask our authors, we want to know how much of this is based on real life. You know, when they write fiction, we ask those questions. We kind of want to know, like, what was the inspiration for this? Or did this really happen to you? You know, like we almost don't believe sometimes with our fiction authors that they completely came up with it on their own. We're almost like, tell us the real story behind this, or the inspiration, or do you know someone that's like this character and such and such? And then when we read memoir and the person is telling what they are saying is their recollection of events in their side of a story, we either say it feels true or it doesn't, and we accept it. And there's a lot of our talk earlier tonight. We said, you know, if this was fiction, I wouldn't have believed it, you know, but this, you know, this is what happened to Tara Westover, at least the way she remembers it. And it was hard to believe. It's shocking. It's amazing where she is now and where some of her siblings are. And in general, I mean, this whole family is still kind of fascinating. I could almost see a docu-series that shows two sides of this. If her family now is going to be, continue to be this successful with their company and then putting out their side of the story in a book, and we're seeing that 3 of her siblings have PhDs, I almost wonder if, we bring up the Kardashians. They're so different than them, but I could almost see, a competing documentary or something that shows both sides. And I would have a hard time believing, because I did want to believe when I read memoir, I do want to believe that this is true, at least to this person's knowledge. I mean, we have examples of like a James Frey, A Million Little Pieces, and that whole debacle where he later admitted, to making up most of that story. But for the most part, memoirs now, ever since that one with James Frey, have had to put disclaimers on them, have had to, even David Sedaris, the hilarious humorist who just writes about his life, has had to have more of a clear distinction in the opening of his books about like, well, this is, me exaggerating, or this is my version of the story and making it funnier. And so don't sue me or tell me that I'm lying or something like that. Which is not to say that then I wanted to detract anything from what Tara Westover did here. It was a compelling story. It's an amazing story. I think it was well written. It definitely made you want to. I mean, you couldn't put it down. At least, I'm speaking for myself here and from what others have said. And I am fascinated to see what she does next with this. I mean, she's come quite a long way, and I think. We're not done with seeing what she's going to do with her talents. Maybe she'll make that a cappella Mormon album that we've all been looking forward to, for that to drop. Her Quarantine. I heard it's she and Taylor Swift are doing this incredible album, and with Bon Iver, but it's just going to secretly drop in a couple weeks. I'll post a link to it when that happens. You guys will love it. It'll be on my Pandora. Anything else tonight, guys? I don't see any hands. We're up next with The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, Pulitzer Prize winner. Really interesting story. Now, this one is a fictionalized version of a true life story. So it's loosely based on some real events, but Colson Whitehead took it and wrote a fictionalized version inspired by those events. So to be clear, the distinction that we're getting into here, but compelling read. It's fairly short. You'll read it pretty quickly. We're back in 2 weeks on 9/9 for The Nickel Boys. And then, like I said, I have our books picked through November, and we'll see what you guys want to do for the other December book. And if you can support through Bookshop, if you can support through a tip, much appreciated. Thank you guys again. I had a great time. I hope you guys did too. I will put an edited version of this video up to share, and maybe the chat also. Feel free to send me any questions, comments, anything, but thanks a lot. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.